I'd like to call the November 13th meeting of the Iowa City Board of Adjustment to order, please. Roll call.
Baker,
Here.
Carlson,
Here.
Parker, Russo,
Here.
Swigert.
Here.
Did Bryce say he's here?
He is not
He is not,
currently
okay.
present.
Okay. All right, before the meeting starts, I have to read a statement that we read at the beginning of every meeting. Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body created by the City of Iowa City according to state statutes. The board's purpose is to decide on applications for variances from the zoning ordinance, appeals of decisions of city officials, and applications for special exceptions requested under the zoning ordinance. Board of Adjustment is an independent volunteer board made up of Iowa City residents and is not part of the city administration. We are assisted in our work by the city attorney's office and by planning staff. Prior to this meeting, board members received the material submitted by the applicants, the staff reports, reviewing the application, and any correspondence submitted by members of the public. Board members have not discussed the application or its merits with each other, staff, the applicant, or any other member of the public in advance of this meeting. All consideration and discussion by the board takes place in open meeting here tonight, where we also have an opportunity to hear from the public. Board bases its decisions on facts and evidence allowed by city code presented in an open meeting. Concise and truthful testimony helps us a great deal in our decision-making, and we ask that if you wish to speak, that you come to the podium, print your name and address on a sign-in sheet, speak clearly into the microphone so your testimony can be heard by all present and by our minute taker, as all testimony becomes part of the public record. We ask that the proceedings be orderly and that when you are testifying, you address your remarks to the board. If this hearing becomes lengthy, we may ask that testimony be focused on new facts or on information not already presented. The order of proceedings on each application will be an oral report by staff summarizing the issues to the case and staff's recommendations, an opportunity for the applicant to speak, an opportunity for any other interested parties to speak for or against the application, an opportunity for final statements and arguments by the applicant and staff, and the board will discuss the issues and evidence, state its findings, and vote on a motion. Motions are always in the affirmative. To begin with, I'd like to open the public hearing on special exception item EXC 24-0004. Application submitted by Stacy Humiston. Stacy Humiston of Reach Fourier Potential, requesting a special exception to allow a daycare use in a low-density single-family residential RS5 zone for the property located at 1839 B Street, EXC 24-0004. First up will be a report from the city staff.
Good evening, and as the chair mentioned, tonight I'll be going over a special exception application EXC 24-0004. This is an application submitted by Stacy Humiston of Reach for Your Potential, requesting a special exception to allow daycare use in low-density single-family residential zone. Shown here, we have an aerial. There's Fifth Ave here. Gardner Street will be over to the west, and then the alley, and across Fifth Ave would be the park. Next, we have the zoning map showing that this property is zoned single-family residential, as is all the surrounding properties. Reach for Your Potential has an offer to purchase the subject property at 1839 B Street for use as a daycare for up to 100 children. This property was built in 1960 as a church and has since been used as a fraternal lodge by the Independent Order of Oddfellows since 1974. The property was developed prior to its current zoning designation of low-density single-family residential, so there are several legal nonconformities ongoing. But the applicant is proposing several site improvements, such as converting the existing drive to one-directional, adding a pedestrian connection through the site, adding some landscaping buffers to the parking area, and also adding a new parking area and outdoor play area south of the alley. Shown here is the site plan, and I won't get into too much detail here because I'll go over it. But you can see the pedestrian connection here, the parking area south of the alley, and then the screening along the parking, and then along the north of the alley here. Here's a photo of the property just showing what it looks like today, and you can see that pedestrian connection that does connect to the entryway and the right-of-way. The Board of Adjustment is charged with approving with conditions, or denying this application based on the facts presented. To approve the special exception, the board must find that it meets all applicable approval criteria, beginning with the specific standards for daycare uses. Required interior activity areas for child daycare centers must obtain at least 35 square feet of usable interior floor space per child. There are some exceptions of areas that aren't included, such as reception areas, kitchens, storage areas, offices, bathrooms, and hallways. The subject property has about 5,552 square feet of interior floor space used for daycare purposes, which could accommodate up to 158 children. The applicant proposes using the subject property for daycare use with up to 100 children, and the applicant does intend to begin the daycare operations with around 40 children and increase that number over time. The proposed use is well below the maximum allowed based on the usable interior floor space. Child daycare uses must provide a fenced outdoor play area of not less than 100 square feet per child based on the maximum number of children that will be using the outdoor play area at any given time. And the outdoor play area must meet the following standards. Playground equipment is not permitted within the front or side setbacks, and outdoor play areas must be well drained, free of hazards, and readily accessible to the daycare center. In residential zones, the outdoor play areas must also be enclosed with a 4-foot-high fence. The subject property is zoned low-density single-family residential, and all the playground equipment proposed is outside of that front and side setback. The site plan also includes the outdoor play area of around 3,795 square feet, which could accommodate up to 37 children at any one time. The outdoor play area is also enclosed with that 4-foot-tall fence and is free from hazards. And this daycare is also within walking distance of the park. Criteria C, the use must provide a drop-off pickup area in a location that is convenient to or has good pedestrian access to the entrance to the facility. This drop-off and pickup area must contain sufficient stacking spaces and/or parking spaces to ensure that traffic does not stack into adjacent streets or public rights-of-way, and to promote safe vehicular circulation. One-way drives are encouraged. Most of this traffic is expected to flow in one direction, coming off of B Street, continuing south through the property, and then exiting through the alley towards Fifth Ave. This alley is currently unimproved, and the proposed use is for a daycare accommodating up to 100 children, which will significantly increase the daily traffic within the alley. Due to the anticipated increase in daily traffic beyond what is typically expected in a residential alley, staff does recommend a condition that Reach for Potential Link improve the alley to city standards from the west property line to Fifth Avenue, which is the shortest improvement route to a street, prior to occupancy to ensure safe and sufficient travel through the site. The applicant has reached out to Public Works for a cost-sharing request, and Public Works is willing to grant this request and do a 50-50 split on cost sharing. And Public Works does estimate this improvements to cost around $80,000. Adjacent property owners will also be responsible for all snow clearance, but the city would maintain the paved alleyway surface if it's improved to the city standards. The subject property also has 24 parking spaces, 11 of these being located south of the alley in the new parking area, and 13 existing non-conforming spaces that are located along the building. The site also has 7 stacking spaces west of the building on a 9-foot wide one-direction drive, and stacking and parking spaces are adequate to accommodate the proposed 100 children and 14 staff members. However, the final number of spaces will be determined by the staff-to-children ratios, which could vary over time. The site plan does also show the minimum 4 bike parking spaces, and parking and stacking spaces are connected to the building through pedestrian routes. Shown here are some photos of the existing alley conditions. This one on the left is the east alley view, so you can see the existing pavement across the alley, and then it transitions into gravel. And then shown on the right is this west alley view. This is looking from the park towards the property. A sidewalk must be constructed connecting the main entrance of the center to the adjacent public rights-of-way. Pedestrian access must be clearly separated from vehicular circulation areas to minimize the extent to which users are required to walk across drives or aisles to gain access to the daycare center. And the subject property has a sidewalk from the main entrance to the public right-of-way. There is currently no sidewalk along B Street right-of-way near the subject property. And the site plan does propose new pedestrian paths with raised curbs through the property along the west and south sides of the building that help minimize the extent to which users must walk across drives or aisles. Staff does recommend a condition that any new pedestrian routes through the site have a raised curb to help ensure pedestrian safety and separation. Staff also recommends the condition that the outdoor play areas be made accessible by a pedestrian route with a demarcated crossing over the alley. Criteria E, if the proposed use is located in a residential zone or in the central planning district, it must comply with the multifamily site development standards. Daycare facilities that are accessory uses are exempt from this provision, but this is a primary use daycare, so these standards do apply, and this property is located within the central planning district. The building and site meet some of the multifamily site development standards, but they don't comply with all standards. This can be related to parking lot location and design or parking screening, mechanical equipment locations, and then some additional standards laid out in the central planning district. However, all existing non-compliant features are considered elements of non-conforming structure or non-conforming development, which does allow a change in use, provided the change does not increase or extend the non-conformity. And all changes to the site being proposed are, as part of this special exception, do not increase or extend the degree of any non-conformities on site, and new site elements will comply with current zoning requirements. Now moving into the general standards. Criteria 1, the specific proposed exception will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. This is an existing building and site characteristics are well suited for daycare use. Any potential negative impacts due to increased traffic are mitigated as discussed below, and the proposed use will provide services that are beneficial to the neighborhood. Criteria 2, the specific proposed exception will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity and will not substantially diminish or impair property values in the neighborhood. The proposed daycare use will primarily be in the existing building, and the outdoor play areas are relatively small and set back and screened from the adjacent properties, which will help mitigate some of these noise impacts. Additional traffic is likely to be generated by the proposed use during business hours, and the proposed traffic flow, site layout, and recommended conditions will help to mitigate any potential negative impacts. The new parking area south of the alley is adequately set back and screened from abutting uses. Staff does recommend that the new S2 screening be required along the property lines of the existing parking areas as well, as a condition of approval to align the property with the current zoning standards. Establishment of the specific proposed exception will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district which such property is located. The surrounding neighborhood is already fully developed with a residential neighborhood and has been in place since 1960. The building has, that is. And it will also provide beneficial services that will not substantially impact the development or improvement of surrounding property. And then conditions are intended to mitigate any potential negative effects on surrounding properties. 4, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or necessary facilities have been or are being provided. All utilities, access roads, and necessary facilities are already established. It is also anticipated that the alley will be a significant increase in vehicle use, and the increased traffic through the alley is expected to accelerate alleyway deterioration without improvements. Improving the alley to city standards would provide a paved surface maintained by the city for the life of the pavement that is capable of accommodating the additional traffic volumes. But if this alley is left unimproved, the alley would require significant ongoing maintenance from the adjacent property owners. And alleys that are not adequately maintained can result in surfaces that are difficult to use or even cause vehicle damage due to potholes, uneven surfaces, and other unmaintained situations. But the conditions proposed are intended to help infrastructure that can handle the increase in traffic volumes. Adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress or egress designed to minimize traffic congestion on public streets. The front is access from B Street, and the rear is access from the alley that enters and exits onto Garden Street or Fifth Ave. And most traffic is expected to flow in one direction, coming from B Street, continuing through the property and exiting east through the alley towards Fifth Avenue. Some staff and drop-off traffic will utilize the alley, though, to access the parking that is located south of the alley and north of the alley. But staff does recommend a condition of approval that do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings be placed to direct traffic through the site. And these conditions ensure that the alley is improved to accommodate the increased traffic that can handle the anticipated future traffic volumes prior to occupancy of the site. No changes are proposed to the existing street or drive on the portion of the property north of the alley, other than adding the pedestrian routes to the site and new landscaping buffers. And the new parking area on the portion south of the alley does comply with the current standards as proposed. Criteria 6, except for the specific regulations and standards applicable to the exception being considered, the specific proposed exception in all other respects conforms to the applicable regulations or standards of the zone in which it is to be located. This subject property is in a single-family zone, and the elements do not meet current standards may continue as legal nonconformities. Some of the elements of the site will be brought into compliance with current standards due to the proposed conditions, such as landscape buffers along property lines, and staff will ensure that all new elements and any future changes comply with relevant standards during building permit and site plan review. Lastly, criteria 7, the proposed exception will be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The future land use map of the comprehensive plan does designate this area as residential, and the central planning district designates this area as private institutional. The comprehensive plan would generally support providing goods and services within convenient walking distance for residents in the immediate area, and the proposed exception would convert a religious private group assembly into a daycare use, both of which are classified as private institutional uses. This is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. Staff recommends approval of special exception application EXC 24-0004 with an expiration timeline of 12 months to allow enough time to receive approval of the site plan, alley improvements, and secure building permit to allow daycare use in a low-density single-family residential zone for the property located at 1839 B Street, subject to the following conditions. Condition 1, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, improvement of the alley to city standards from the western property line to east to Fifth Avenue, the development of a pedestrian path with demarcated crossing over the alley from the building to the play area, subject to review and approval by the city engineer. Condition 2, any new pedestrian routes through the site that directly abut areas shall be separated by a raised curb or barrier that is a minimum of 5 inches in height. Condition 3, provide screening to the S2 standard between the parking areas and adjacent properties along the east and west property lines as shown on the site plan. And condition 4, provide do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings to direct traffic through the site. That concludes the presentation, and I now turn it over to the chair.
Any questions for the staff?
Yes, I have a question. So your staff report talks about existing site development that's currently non-conforming, which is legally allowed to continue. So I just want to establish there are unshielded outdoor floodlights on the building. They do not conform to current Iowa City standards, but they would be allowed to remain under this proposal.
Unless the board put a condition that they be brought into compliance, they could allow to continue.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I just have a quick one. Parker, we got this letter from December of last year regarding the sidewalk paving from the board to the council. Did the council respond to this or act on this?
Yeah, the Public Works surveyed the neighborhood and they were opposed to sidewalk along B Street. So they have focused their efforts now along Friendship, which there are a few remaining gaps on the north side of Friendship. And this street is located just south of B Street, but there is no plans for sidewalk along B Street at this time.
Okay, thank you.
And so we don't have to address that at all.
If you don't want to, it's not part of this review, and Public Works determined that the neighborhoods did not want a sidewalk there.
And the parts of the sidewalk that they are putting in Friendship, the city is paying for.
They will pay for that. There's some infill gaps right now, and speaking with Public Works, it's not in their immediate plans right now to get that done, but it is on their radar to fill those gaps, yes. And the city will pay for that.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'd like to ask the applicant to come forward and address the board and possibly respond to questions.
I should have asked someone.
Good evening. I'm Ross Nusser, and I'm with Urban Acres Real Estate, and I represent Reach for Your Potential. Thank you again for hearing us tonight, and thank you, staff, for helping out with this proposal. Reach for Your Potential is requesting that the Board of Adjustment approve this special exception without being subject to the conditions 1A and B, as well as 4, as recommended by the City of Iowa City for the following reasons. The first reason is the improvements to the alleyway are a source of controversy within the neighborhood, as evidenced by the Good Neighbor meeting, as well as communication between our civil engineers and Iowa City Council member Josh Moe. Reach for Your Potential is exploring other circulation options for the front of the building that would eliminate the need to improve the alleyway, but needs more time than contractually possible to further explore this option. Reach for Your Potential needs approval of this special exception tonight to stay within the bounds of their contract to purchase the property located at 1839 B Street. If the front of the building circulation is not possible, Reach for Your Potential will install the alleyway as proposed by the city engineer as the alternative, demarcated paths included. We learned some information when Parker was sharing, so this is a little outdated here, but Reach for Your Potential had started discussions with the city engineer regarding potential cost-sharing agreement for the alleyway. However, the city engineer at previous point would not commit to any agreement prior to the special exception being approved, which is in part why Reach for Your Potential is exploring the front-loaded circulation as an option. There is no code justification for requesting the improvements to the alleyway. Rather, this is being recommended per engineer's judgment. We are appealing to the Board of Adjustment for pragmatic and common sense judgment in this. Reach for Your Potential and the City of Iowa City are both benevolent organizations who will be able to reach a mutually agreeable solution to this issue, but this project could potentially be needlessly hindered by attaching conditions 1A and B and 4 to the special exception. And that's it.
Questions for Mr. Nusser?
So the city was the one who said that you needed to do the exit on the alleyway and entrances on B Street and entrances on B Street and exit is on Fifth Avenue.
Correct.
This was not your idea. This was the city's idea.
That's correct.
Did they discuss what a residential alley usually means? And how many residential alleys are there in Iowa City that are paved?
No.
Do you know of any other residential alleys in Iowa City that are paved?
Not that I'm aware of.
And how much traffic does as a neighbor, how much traffic can a neighbor expect to have on an alleyway?
In general, I'm not sure how much traffic a neighbor would be able to expect to have on an alleyway. The concern, just to elaborate a little bit of the concern that occurred during the Good Neighbor meeting, is this property is located very close to City High School. And the concern was that improving the alleyway could result in it becoming a speedway, particularly if the alleyway was improved the entire duration, which it's not being proposed to be improved the entire duration. But those were concerns from the neighbors at the meeting, as well as someone who reached out to Councilmember Moe.
Okay, so the child care center would use the alleyway as a means of egress to get out.
The child care center would do one of two things. They would either work with the city to figure out how a front-loaded circulation would work out, in which case the alleyway would not be used as that primary route, or if the front-loaded circulation did not work, then they would go to the alleyway and they would work with Public Works to improve that alleyway condition.
In here, it states that the neighbors on the alleyway will be responsible for clearing the snow in the wintertime. It will be a joint cost for all the people on the alleyway.
I'll let Josh Willems with Reach speak to that, but although that may be what is expected within there, practically that's not how Reach is thinking of this. Correct? Reach if the alleyway is improved, Reach would maintain the snow path because they're the primary users of that alleyway.
Because probably up until this time, that alleyway has not been cleared of snow in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Most of the time, oftentimes residential alleyways are not cleared in the wintertime.
Yeah, that's correct, and it would be onerous to the people who have lived there for quite a while to take on an additional improvement without having consent on it, really.
Okay. It was stated that you were to have do not enter signage and one-way permanent markings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, would that be on the alleyway besides the parking lot, besides the entrance from B Street? Would that be on the alleyway from the edge of the property to Fifth Avenue?
I believe so, and that's one of the conditions that, with the first condition that we're asking that the board not.
Okay, so in that case, the landowners on the alleyway could only get to their property by driving through your property from B Street and turning and going down to Fifth Avenue. If it's all one way, then if they want to get to their property, and there is one house on the very corner of the entrance exit of the alley right now on Fifth Avenue that has a garage behind it. I don't think it's used right now, but there is a garage there that they could use if they wanted to. With this type of setup, in order to use their garage, would they have to enter the parking lot on B Street, drive through your parking lot, drive all the way down the alley so they could park in their garage?
I believe so, or to enter through Garden Street. So there would be those two entry points. It would either be through, the alleyway connects to both Fifth Avenue as well as Garden Street.
Okay,
So
they
it would
could go,
either have to be
so they could
further-
start at the other end of the alley and drive a whole block.
Correct.
Through the alleyway to get to their garage. There is another property on Friendship, although there is a fence behind it and a grassy area that's probably 10 feet wide. There are cars parked there. I don't know who they belong to or whatever. They were there yesterday, they were there today. So those people would also have to do the same thing. They would not be able to go into the driveway from Fifth Avenue for the distance of 1 or 2 lots to park their cars there. They would either have to go through your parking lot or start at the other end of the street and drive 1 block down to where they want to park.
That sounds correct to me.
May I provide some clarification on that?
Please.
That standard, this alley is not a one-way. The do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings are for the property only. You could go up and down that alley in either direction. It's two-way traffic.
Just to their, it would be two-way traffic just to their lot, to their lot.
The entire length of the alley is two-way traffic. We are not proposing a condition to make that alley one-way. Only as traffic moves through the property itself is it one-way.
So it would be through their parking lot themselves, where you would drive in from B Street to unload the children, and then they would go onto the alleyway between the building and the play area.
That's correct.
And once they got onto that section of the alley between the building and the play area, then there could be traffic coming from the other direction.
They could go in either direction, yes. The condition is proposing to improve the alley on the shortest distance to a street. That would be towards Fifth Avenue. But you can continue to drive two ways.
Okay. So how many cars do you think will be dropping people off and picking people up?
I think that Josh could probably better answer that question. Yeah.
I do have one question.
Yes.
For you. Can you explain to me more clearly what front-loading is?
Yeah, so right now, the alleyway is fairly unimproved. Front-loading would be the addition of some sort of circular drive where you wouldn't need the alleyway for circulation. So if we could come to an agreement with the city, which we had sent a plan out earlier today to the city, and there was not enough time for them to circulate because it was earlier today. But it would essentially allow people to not have to access that alleyway as a means of egress out from the site, except for the rear parking spaces. So when people are coming to drop off their children, they would be dropping them off in the front of the property as opposed to the rear of the property.
So the stacking spaces along the side of the building, along the current drive, would not be used as stacking spaces?
I think Bryce would be, is that correct? That's correct.
Okay, so you said, are you done? I'm sorry. Are
Yeah.
you done? Okay, so you said you were going to start with 40 kids. So what is the probability of each of those children being dropped off one at a time in one car, so you would have 40 cars?
We're starting off right now with employee only, so most employees will have maybe 2 to 3 kids.
Just would you identify yourself
Yes.
and sign in, please?
Josh Willems, I am the financial director at Reach for Your Potential. Reach for Your Potential. But for the first year, we are anticipating just being open to our staff, and then growing it from there while we work the kinks out. So I would assume probably the beginning part, probably no more than 5 cars at a time.
How many?
5.
5?
Yeah. Again, focusing on our staff, they have different shift needs, and so the drop-off times would vary between like 8 to 10 o'clock in the morning, just at the different shift times.
So drop-off times would be primarily between 8 and 10 in the morning?
It would depend on the shift of the staff, but most would be 8 as one shift, 10 as another shift, and the next time wouldn't be till probably after school hours, about 3 o'clock.
So there would be drop-offs in the late afternoon also?
There would probably be some drop-offs in the late afternoon.
Okay, and what about pickups?
Again, it would depend on the shifts, but I would probably anticipate most people being dropped off in the morning between that 7:30 to 8 window, and then probably most by 5 or 6 would be the pickups.
It wouldn't go into the evening.
We are thinking at this point probably till maybe 8:30 would be.
8:30.
We have a lot of, again, shifts that kind of might end at 8 also. And so, again, we're trying to accommodate our staff more than anything else at the moment. So yeah, probably up to 8:30 could be the latest pickup window. But at that point, we're also looking at office staff wouldn't be part of that, so it would probably be more 2 or 3 families, maybe 4 families that are doing it at that single time. So.
Ross, could you clarify exactly the request you're making to delete these 2 items? Is it 3?
Yeah.
I thought it was 1A and
A and B, and number 4.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. You seem to be saying you want an either-or situation. You want to have the front-loading proposal approved, worked out with the city, and therefore we would not need the alley, right? I'm just trying to figure out what we're going to approve tonight, or whether or not this needs to be deferred to have that discussion made with the city staff to come back to us.
Yeah, so there are a couple things going on right now. One is that for Reach for Your Potential's contract on this building, tonight is the deadline for approval or disapproval of this. That's not to say that an extension couldn't be requested, it's just to say tonight's the deadline for
The deadline for
the contract.
for the purchase?
For the purchase, yes, yes. So what we're saying is that we've gone back and forth with the city over the past month on this, and we have arrived to today, and we still haven't quite worked out what it is. But the either-or scenario is just saying, we want to make something work that works for everyone, including the neighbors. We want to be able to explore if the front load option is the best option for the neighborhood. If that's not the best option, then it seems appropriate to do the alleyway, which is what we would do.
The reason I ask is if you're under a deadline, then what we have to approve has to be very specific in that either you're going to reach an agreement with the city staff on front loading within a certain period of time, or you agreed, if you don't, that you are obligated to improve that alley.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So we can word it that way if possible? Ann? I just want to say
Yeah.
rule out the alley.
I would think
You're going to be
ideal,
obligated to one or the other. Okay.
ideally, you'd want to defer it because you want to have a site plan that staff has reviewed and it's gone
Right.
through and it's doable. But I certainly understand the legal constraints they're under, but can try to craft something. But I think it's difficult when you don't have the facts before you. You don't have a site plan that staff has been able to present to you and you've been able to review about what that looks like. And what will that do with traffic? And what will that do with the entrance and the parking and so on and so forth?
Okay. If we worded this prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy A and B, we added a C, negotiation with city staff for front-loading option must be achieved or settled, or else A and B kick in. I mean, that's an awkward way of phrasing it, but,
Doesn't sound like a special exception.
yeah, it doesn't.
Right, it doesn't. I think you really got to ask yourselves if you don't have a site plan in front of you that you can review with regard to parking, with regard to traffic, et cetera, is it ripe for your review? And it's That's your decision.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, but you certainly have the option of continuing the public hearing.
Right. We can continue the public hearing. I don't know how this affects your negotiations for your contract, but I don't sense the board being comfortable approving just a blanket removal of the alley option and not having the opportunity to see the alternative.
Yeah, and I don't think that the removal of the alley option is something that we're wanting altogether. I mean, that's something that could easily happen here. I just think if it were to be continued, it might not be continued. I mean, that might be the stop of the project as a whole. This application a similar application for a different daycare facility came before the Board of Adjustment last year around this time.
Same, yeah. Same
Yeah, yeah. And again, we held the good neighbor meeting, and we were trying to be responsive to public comments on this as well, and to be good neighbors to this neighborhood. This building has existed since 1960 here. And tonight's the first night that we've heard that Public Works will commit dollars to this alleyway. Prior to this, it was trying to figure out that the whole onus of the alleyway was going to be on Reach for Your Potential, which is why we were looking at other options, because it's a daycare facility for employees to provide so that they can serve the community at Reach for Your Potential. And prior to getting a commitment from them, it was very difficult to make any sort of decision. So we were having to look at cost-saving measures to make this project a practical reality. And that's why the discussion. If we had known prior to tonight that the city engineer was indeed willing to contribute in a cost sharing, we would have been able to have that discussion. But Josh, and we had spoken to them as recently as like yesterday.
Monday, maybe?
Monday, yeah, where they were non-committal on that, which is why we are asking for this.
So you were talking about another option. Had that ever been discussed before?
I sent it to Parker this morning. Again, not enough time to get full circulation within staff.
And certainly the board doesn't have to continue it for a month. You could try to do it for a shorter period of time that would allow, and I certainly can't speak for the seller, but presumably there would be an extension for a shorter period of time. I don't know that, of course, but all I'm saying is the board, if they want to continue the public hearing and defer the hearing, they don't have to wait to the December meeting. They could decide on another evening that they would be available if that's what the board chose to do.
Is that feasible for y'all?
Not per the contract. Per the contract tonight is, and I would imagine that if we were forced into the decision tonight, that we would probably go with the alleyway.
Sorry.
If the decision needed to be forced tonight, we would probably go along with the city recommendation for the alleyway. But I don't think the neighborhood wants that, is the whole thing. And so, like, allowing the opportunity to explore the other option and not put Reach or the neighborhood in a difficult position
Right.
is what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I'm very sympathetic to that. Now, my question is, if we approve this tonight with the conditions suggested by the staff, can you come back? Are they allowed to come back and ask for another variance or exception based on, to reevaluate this decision after they've figured out the front-loading issue? If they can't do it, they're obligated to the alley. But if they can do it, can they come back and ask for approval?
I suppose they could.
Are we missing something here? The phrase is, the clause is, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, which is way down the road.
Right.
These things have to be, so, I mean, are we a little premature here in all of this?
Can we hear, are there some other people here who want to speak? I'd like
Be
to,
interested.
I assume that some of the people on the other side have something
Yeah,
to say.
yeah,
and maybe.
we can sit down and be
Yeah,
retained.
and I would like to hear what everybody sort of has to say.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Get back to you, Ross. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak in support of this application? If not, would anybody like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come and identify yourself and sign in, please.
My name is Deb Wallard. I live at 513 Fifth Avenue, right on the alley. I had two issues. The traffic was one of them. The traffic down the alley is really busy every day already. So I would like to see that, what do you call it, the roundy round where they drop people off. I'm just concerned about turning the alley into a one-way thing because kids ride their bikes down the alley. And by the way, Fifth Avenue is the city high speedway, not the alley. So, I don't know. I've been wanting something to happen with that building, and it would be nice to see a tenant in there or an owner that is using that space. I've been in there for soup, kitchen, dinners, and it's a nice space. But yeah, it's just the traffic issue is something that I'm a little concerned about. And it's been addressed, so whatever gets decided, but I've
Would
had
your
my
concerns
say.
be a little bit eased if for example, a paved alley had speed bumps in it? A couple of speed bumps to slow down the traffic?
Does that really help? I mean, does it really help, speed bumps?
I don't, they slow me down, but I'm an old guy.
Was it clear to you, excuse me, but is it clear to you that Parker's indicated that the entire alley is not changing to one way? It's just-
Correct, it's
right.
not.
So it'll be two-way, it's only for people entering, through the affected property here.
It is two-way now, and from the Oddfellows to Friendship, to Garden Street, the alley is a mess. It's full of potholes and ruts, and it is really in bad shape.
And that's, by statute, that's property owner's responsibility, correct?
I don't know the rules.
property
I don't think that most, I
Unfortunately-
don't even use the alley.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to take responsibility for the little bit of alley that's next to my house. I don't know the rules, so.
The city will only maintain the surface if it is improved to city standards.
Well, I sure wish they'd go down there and look at that last part of the alley. That's all I have to say. It's just the traffic is a concern for me. Because we have a lot of kids.
Well, let me ask you this. If they do their due diligence and investigate the possibility, all the possibilities of a different access point, some sort of a loop drop-off from the front side of the building, and it proves impossible, and they purchase the property, now they have to develop the alleyway. Are we putting, people in a further bind here because of this?
I don't know, because I don't use the alley. Probably, I wish that the people who do use the alley would have shown up today so they could give their say, but I wasn't even aware of this neighborhood meeting. But I did get the letter for this meeting. So,
How long have you lived in your house?
I bought my house in 2005, so almost 20 years.
And this is your major investment for your lifetime, isn't it?
My main what?
This is the major investment that you will make in your lifetime, your house.
Yes, unless I move someplace else.
And would you say that's probably true of all the people who live around there? That this is not, they don't own a house somewhere else or whatever, this is the major investment that they have in this house right now?
Correct. And I want to reiterate that I would like to see a tenant in that building and have that building be put to good use. It's just sitting there, you know.
Any other
Any other
questions?
questions?
I have a question for,
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I have a question for you. Yes, yes, sir.
Ross.
As you developed this concept, did you give any consideration to front-loading this? Or did that develop after you discovered there might be difficulties with the alleyway? Or how
Yeah.
far along are you on that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So last year, when the Board of Adjustment approved this application, they approved it with the improvements of the alleyway. And so we were going under the assumption, we had spoken to city staff to talk to them about how that standard might be. And so originally, we were talking about different types of surfacing for the alleyway, and then it evolved into, this is the one way to do it, is the 7-inch thick concrete on the alleyway. We then held the Good Neighbor meeting, and it was at that, and the Good Neighbor meeting was on maybe 2 weeks ago. And so it was after the Good Neighbor meeting, which we heard concerns similar to what was being voiced about the alley. Because in our original submission, we had shown that alleyway being improved. It was after the Good Neighbor meeting that we changed the site plan on the application to remove the alleyway improvement.
When we approved it last year, do you remember, did it include a requirement to improve the alleyway?
Yes.
Bring it up to city standards?
Yes, same condition we have here tonight.
I see.
Refresh my memory again. Was there any discussion of an alternative to the alley?
No, I read the minutes. Was no discussion of an alternative surface at that time.
Because the front-loading option seems, just in terms of safety and convenience, more logical for a project like this.
I did review what Ross sent over this morning, and there are some notable concerns, mainly the multifamily site development standards apply to this property, and that does not allow any parking within the front and between the front of the building and the street. So that loop is, as I saw today, does not meet the standards.
No parking, but what about access?
A loop drive maybe, but this is required to have stacking spaces, and those are considered parking spots. They cannot be between the front of the building and the street. They can also not extend into the right-of-way, which again, just looking off what I saw this morning, the stacking spaces were within the right-of-way, did not meet city code.
This is a special exception. I mean, we're already dealing with a special exception. And so you go, no, we can't do that because that's not what is done in other places. But we are in a place where we're trying to figure out how to get something that will work for all the people in the neighborhood. The person who wants to put in a child care center, which is a wonderful thing, but also the neighbors who own their own property and want.
May I just remind the board that you have to look at the standards. The question is whether the specific and the general standards have been met. I think that's what you need to concentrate on. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that that's the important thing.
And we cannot determine whether some sort of front-loading option meets any standards because we don't have the option in front of us.
Correct.
Let me ask one more question. There's probably not a long line of potential buyers. Could you extract a week out of this seller get some of these things resolved? I mean, obviously, you're sitting in front, you're standing in front of a board that's willing to work with you, but we need more information.
It's certainly something that we could request from the seller. It is not something that we could have a guarantee of getting granted from the seller. And again, I think the preference would be if we can't, if we aren't afforded the time to look into this option, we'd like to go ahead with city staff recommendation. It was just, to Ms. Carlson's point, it was just that we're trying to be good neighbors here and figure it out is all that it is.
I don't see how we can leave. this
Well,
easy.
yeah, so we're back to the dilemma of, we're very amenable to a different option, but it's not in front of us, except in a concept. I'll go there. And so what we have to do is either accept, reject, or amend this proposal. And I'm not, I'm averse to amending this proposal right now, the conditions. Changing them in the future, if we had an alternative, I'm amenable to. But we don't have an alternative right now, except, again, the concept. So,
Excuse me, Chair. Also, Sue directly, I do have the concept Ross shared this morning with initial staff comments. I could share that if it helps the board and if that information can be provided at this time.
I think you just have to decide whether that's sufficient.
I'm sorry.
You just have to decide whether that's sufficient. All you have is initial staff concepts on something that was submitted this morning.
No.
I mean, again, that's up to the board, but I think you need to consider that and whether you want to make a decision tonight, you want to hold the public hearing open and defer it for a short period of time on the hope that they can get an extension on the purchase agreement, or go forward this evening. I think those are.
but once again, we could approve this based on the staff recommendation, and then
Yeah.
we could amend this in the future. Is that possible?
They can come back and make an application, sure.
And that's something we would be amenable to.
They would come back and we would go through another hearing like this.
Would they have to pay another fee?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we're amenable to it.
How much is the fee?
It's not a little.
Yeah, that's up.
We have made special meeting times, and if there's some sort of schedule problem for applicants, doesn't have to wait another month, for example. But we do need to have something in front of us to override this. So,
Then I think the request would be to approve this subject to the conditions of the city.
okay, and then knowing that we're amenable to you coming back with, once you have plans, once you have the staff in line, and go from there.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
That would allow you to purchase the property,
Correct.
all right, and you still sort of hold an option.
Yeah. Just to clarify that if it's approved in this way, then we would be saying that we are bound to improving the alleyway unless another option could present
Unless we
itself.
approve a different option,
Okay.
yep.
Yep.
So I just have a question. If they say, okay, if we approve this, can they change and do a different plan, or are they locked in then to doing it this way?
Well, the board, we'd have to depend on what the special exception is for. You're going to have the board's going to have to amend its decision.
No, but if we approve it as it is here
Right.
with
Right.
with the text that is before us tonight,
Right.
then are they bound to that special exception?
Well, they can walk away, obviously. They don't have to do anything, just like the last.
Or they can come back and,
They can come
Or
back.
they could come back?
Right.
So I have a question that's totally not related to these conditions. And again, it's about the outdoor lighting that's currently unshielded with floodlights. Is the style of the lighting in the outside. I see no plans, I just want to confirm anywhere in here that there are any plans to bring those up to code.
I think that Bryce might be able to talk more to that, but I think that
Also,
they,
was this an item that was discussed at the neighborhood meeting?
the lighting.
Neighbors raised any issues?
It was not.
Yeah, my name is Bryce Hawken. I'm with McClure Engineering. We're the civil engineer that's assisting the applicant. There's been no research done into the existing exterior lighting. That could be a condition that's put on this. But currently, for this application, there were no standards that needed to be met in regards to exterior lighting.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. While I'm up here, I can also clarify any other civil-related questions. I know there's been quite a bit of discussion already regarding the circulation on the site, but anything else I can answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kyle Martin with Martin Gardner Architecture. I'm the architect for this project. One, to comment towards the lighting, we are adding a variety of additional egress exiting out of the building, which will require new emergency lighting and things like that that would have to comply with zoning codes. So if they are older floodlights in particular, it's likely that we will replace a lot of those, both to comply with the any local zoning codes and also to match whatever new is placed on the building, so.
Okay, that's good news. However, there would be no plans to replace the lighting along the currently there along the eaves that are not, for example, the one towards the park on that side of the building. There's a floodlight that kind of shines down into the house right next door. That would remain, correct? There would be no plans, that's not an egress?
Without knowing exactly which floodlight you're referring to, I imagine the site lighting will be addressed, particularly if we have pickup and drop-off with children and youth at potentially dark hours. So we'll certainly look at that as we move forward.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Any other public comments, for or against?
So again, before you close the public hearing, please have that discussion whether you want to defer it or close the public hearing and make a decision.
What'd you say?
We have to, before we close the public hearing, we have to decide whether we're going to defer or
Right.
vote on
Okay,
it.
yeah.
We have to have a discussion amongst ourselves.
I hate getting old. I have my hearing aids in. I think the board needs to decide whether or not we want to defer this or vote on it as presented. My preference would be to vote on it as presented. Open to any other discussion?
I'm really nervous about this. I asked a lot of questions, and I was not trying to be mean to you. I should have asked some of these questions to the city staff. Because I went over and I drove around that alleyway and those streets yesterday afternoon. I spent an hour over there. Probably if some people in their houses were looking out their windows, they thought there was some crazy woman casing the place, and I was.
In the black pickup truck.
It says in here that we are to, that the potential negative impacts due to increased traffic is mitigated as discussed below. Recommended conditions will mitigate potential negative impacts. I'm not sure. I think I would hope there's a better solution. I don't feel comfortable with this. I live in a neighborhood where we have a alleyway that is used as a street. I know what it's like when you have lots of traffic on an alleyway. I feel like I live in a traffic island surrounded by traffic with no quiet place that I can have a quiet moment by myself. So the lady who spoke, who lives on the alleyway, those two houses on the Fifth Avenue are very close to the alleyway, very close. The one on the right-hand side looking at the alleyway, the bottom step of that stoop is probably 5 feet from the alleyway. And I'm not, as I said, I am not making derogatory comments towards you. I am looking at the situation and going, okay, how do we deal with this in a way that we have more winners than losers? And so I don't know I don't know about this. I don't want to vote on this. And if I did vote on it, I probably would not vote for it.
Well, the question right now is, is there a consensus on the board to defer or to go ahead and vote on the application as presented?
Well, I think the applicant has stated that rather than defer, they would rather go ahead and have us approve the current staff recommendation and the conditions. So
agree.
I would
Is
not
that
be,
correct? Do you understand that?
I would not be in favor of deferring.
Yeah, that is correct. We would prefer to go ahead with staff recommendation.
Okay, great.
So would you be willing to spend another $500 or $600 and come back with another?
I think that it would be something that could be looked at first. The whole idea of what we're talking about tonight is with the emphasis of being good neighbors and of making sure that concerns are mitigated. There's also the practical emphasis of we have a contract that has dates on it, and that date happens to be tonight, which is why we would prefer it not to be deferred, just so that it can be crossed. We'd certainly look at that. But yeah, I think that we're just asking for approval of this, which is what was approved last year.
Can I say something?
Sure.
You obviously went through all the motions to educate the public, and you had the hearing, et cetera. And there's only one party here tonight to voice exceptions to this. My concern is that, this has been announced, it's been legally advertised, et cetera. I would think that if an abutting property owner were really concerned about it, they would be here tonight. That's.
And we've had a lot of issues like that where they do show up.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, Nancy, that we have, we all want to sort of protect the public and not, not introduce an element that jeopardizes their homes or whatever. By the same token, that's sort of in the abstract here. If they aren't, if they aren't here to speak up, that's all. So.
Sure. Come up, identify yourself and sign in.
What's that?
Identify yourself and sign in.
My name's Tim Ruth, and I own properties at 910 Willow and at 1748 Dickinson, and I own all the empty lots on Dickinson Street, down on the south end, that I lease to Reach for Your Potential. I have a daughter that is a client of Reach for Your Potential. My wife is on the board of directors of Reach for Your Potential. So, as you can see, we're connected.
Yeah.
I'd like to put a little twist to the whole thing, and that is the need for this facility. I don't know if any of you get the call in the evening that there's no staff at your daughter's house because they can't get daycare. That's the immense need of this facility, is so that the staff, we can draw a better quality of staff because we offer daycare as a benefit. This is a really needed thing, and we keep kicking the can down the road. We're just not going to get it done. And with the need comes, with the immense need of special needs adults having safe housing, comes staff, and the lack of staff is, everybody knows how hard it is to hire anyone. This is a huge benefit that'll benefit so many of our staff members, and we'll get better staff, we'll get more staff. And so the need is very immense. And yes, it's going to take time to develop this, but I would much rather, as a property owner in Iowa City, see a business that wants to do something for their employees be able to put in a daycare center in an empty building that frankly is an eyesore. And knowing what Reach will do to this building, it's going to be a very good addition to the community. And so I think that that's something that really needs to be talked about. And as for the alley, maybe someday somebody ought to talk to the city about why do we need a 7-inch concrete alley on 6 inches of rock serving the back of a building that is a daycare. And maybe the cost, the cost from the city was $80,000. I put a cost on it of under 30 if it was done by in private business. But what I'm getting at is, please approve this so we can move forward and get this going, because every day we don't have a daycare, we might lose a good staff person. And it's so important right now. And Reach for Your Potential is a pillar in this community. When Ron Schiefert started it and until now, it's a pillar. Our daughter has lived there since she was 21 years old, and she is now 41. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Applicant? Anyone else? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And we need to have a motion to discuss.
I'll make that motion.
Yeah. You're going to approve that. You're going to move that we approve that.
I move that we approve EXC 24-0004 with an expiration timeline of 12 months to allow enough time to receive approval of the site plan, alley improvements, and secure a building permit. To allow a daycare use in a low-density, single-family residence, RS5, zone for the property located at 1839 B Street, subject to the following conditions. 1, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, Section A, improvement of the alley to city standards from the western property line east to Fifth Avenue, and B, development of a pedestrian path with a demarcated crossing over the alley from the building to the play area, subject to review and approval by the city engineer. 2, any new pedestrian routes through the site that directly abut parking areas shall be separated by a raised curb or barrier that is a minimum of 5 inches in height. 3, provide screening to the S2 standard between parking areas and adjacent properties along the east and west property lines as shown in the site plan. And 4, provide do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings to direct traffic through the site.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We need to have a discussion of the findings of fact or approval of the findings of fact.
Well, so my comments are, this is obviously difficult, but I do strongly believe that the floodlights need to be addressed, just as in the previous application, the outdoor lighting. And I would like to condition that add that to the conditions that the outdoor lighting must comply with current Iowa City lighting standards.
Do we add that to the motion?
Sure, is that just a friendly, but
Is there any discussion on
Yeah,
that
right.
comment?
So are they, do they come on when the sun goes down, or are they on all night?
I don't know their operation, but they're there. And they could be operated all night, they could be, I don't know.
This was not a condition we imposed on the previous applicant, was it?
Yes, it was.
yeah, you imposed it, yes.
It was, okay,
Imposed,
very
yes.
good, thank you. I would agree to that.
Okay.
Do we need to provide the do not enter signage and one-way pavement markings to direct traffic through the site?
Well, I'd leave that until the front loading issue is resolved.
Do we want to remove that?
No, I don't
No.
want to remove it. But I do want to add condition, condition 5? That, you want to phrase that again?
That outdoor lighting must comply with current City of Iowa City lighting standards.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments, questions, revisions? Somebody needs to make a
This
statement.
allows you then to proceed with your purchase and then develop or redevelop a site plan, as you wish, and come back to us if you want. So this is the best we can do, and I think we've worked real hard, obviously, to make it work for everyone here.
But somebody needs to make a statement about the findings of fact, right?
Okay.
Not me, because I don't agree.
Regarding EXC 24-0004, I concur with the findings and the conditions set forth in the staff report of November 13th, 2024, and conclude that the general and specific standards are satisfied, including the required indoor and outdoor spaces, the stacking spaces, the parking spaces, construction of the sidewalk from the main entrance to the public right-of-way. I do find that there is an exception, and that is the outdoor lighting is not up to current standards, which we have put as a condition. So unless amended or opposed by another board member, I recommend that the board adopt the findings in the staff report with this additional condition of approval for this application.
Second.
That's it. Do you want to object to the acceptance of the standards, the findings?
I agree with those. The only one I am concerned about is, I don't know whether they have dealt with the negative effects of the increased traffic as well as could be done.
The city, you mean?
Yeah, the city, because of the alleyway. And also, yeah, that, I can't say anything else. I need to say
And
that.
you're certainly free to vote no on the application. Okay. Any other discussion? This motion's been made, amended, seconded. Call for roll call.
Baker,
Yes.
Carlson,
No.
Parker, Russo,
Yes?
Swigert.
Yes.
Okay. The motion is approved. Any person desiring to appeal this decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after this decision is filed with the city clerk's office. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Or
Well, no, we can't.
No, I'm just kidding.
whenever they can.
Joke.
And
Next item
I'm-
on the agenda is the consideration of the meeting minutes, August 22nd and October the 10th.
Move to approve the minutes.
I second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes passed. Board of Adjustment information.
Yeah, the resolution to adopt or amend the bylaw procedures was adopted by City Council, and that is in your packet.
Do you know if Bryce is reapplying, or there will be an opening in January of this year, of next year?
I do not know. I have not heard from him. I did not hear from him for this either. So.
We can't? Okay.
No.
He's served two terms.
No, you can't. Paula was able to reapply
Yes.
because she finished.
Served a partial
A
term.
partial term.
Yeah.
But if you serve a whole term, you cannot
can't.
reapply for.
Oh, I see.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
I make the motion to adjourn?
I second.
Second, moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.